Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to afikra. My name is Mike Mhenna. I'm going to be hosting tonight with Tariq Shalali. I'm very, very excited to welcome Rosaline Elbay. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you so much for having us, joining us.
Thank you guys for having me.
Rosaline Elbay is an Egyptian actor and writer. She is best known for her roles as Amani in the Hulu A24 films series Ramy, and as Sara on the MBC Masr series Qabeel. Rose read classics at Oxford University and completed a master's in colonial history. She then studied at the Actors Studio in New York with Elizabeth Kemp and obtained her MFA in acting from LAMDA. She is a critically acclaimed actor and writer who has been featured in productions in both the Middle East, Europe, and the UK, and the US. We are delighted to have Rose join afikra Conversations. Rose, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you. You had more information than I thought you were going to. How did you, what? Where have you been digging?
Thanks so much. So I think the easiest way to start is to start with the story which struck me first when I was sort of getting to know you. How did you go from studying, is why essentially, like how did you decide to go from studying the classics at Oxford as somebody who grew up in Egypt, went to Oxford, studied archaeology, studied the classics, and then made right turn, whatever style turn into theater? Walk us through that story.
Okay, I mean, I always liked acting, like growing up and stuff, but I just kind of went off it a little bit in high school and wanted to be all, like I would change my mind about what I wanted to be like every 6 months. And then what really got me into acting is one of the most embarrassing stories of my life, which I think Tariq already knows.
Please share.
Okay.
We wait bated breath.
Thanks, Tariq, which is basically in my first term, there was this like play festival where the first year of every like college at university had to do a play, and it was supposed to be like, oh, it's fun and no one cares and like just make it funny. And they did this play called Julius and Cleopatra, and I was the brownest person in college, so I was Cleopatra. And it was supposed to be like a play where everything goes wrong. So like you have a chariot made out of like a shopping cart and it would fall apart and people would forget lines, but it was part of the comedy. And we were doing it and it was going really well. And then like the last bit, my character was supposed to be the only one taking it seriously and like was getting more and more annoyed as stuff went wrong. And then I was supposed to kill myself with this hand puppet asp. And it was the part I really hated because it was just me on stage, like talking to my hand and then killing myself and then dying. But then everyone was laughing. So I was like, oh, maybe I'm not like that shit at this. And then I died. And like in rehearsal, I died on a couch. But because this was a black box theater, they've been like, don't bring big props. Like if you need a couch, we'll just push some chairs together and put like a cloth over it. So we've done that. So there was no arm of the couch, so there was no back. So I start dying and there's nothing for me to die on. So I was like, I'm a professional. I'll just keep going and die on the floor. So I kept going, but I was wearing a strapless dress and the dress didn't come with me. So long story short, I won Best Actress. Basically, because they felt
the full commitment. The full commitment got you there.
The full commitment to the part, yeah. But like it just kind of snowballed. Like besides like that moment, it was really fun. And then by the end of my first year, I was doing this semi-professional tour during the summer. And then by like halfway through my second year, I was doing like more plays a term than I was doing work. And then I realized that like, oh, maybe this is actually what I want to be doing. And then the revolution happened, so I went to the LSE for a year because I wanted to like fix the world. But yeah, so it didn't feel like a U-turn. It kind of felt like I was doing everything at the same time, and it still feels that way. But I think what pushed me into drama school is I realized that at a certain point, especially what the industry looked like 6 years ago, I just wasn't going to get the parts I wanted to get unless I had trained because people were seeing me in a very specific way.
You maybe tell us a little bit about how you split your time, where your passions lie, and how you go from one to the other.
if I'm like totally honest, my passion still lies in theater. Like that's my favorite thing to do, and that's what I want to go back to. Like I think if I spent the rest of my life just doing theater and you were like, you can't do screen anymore, I'd be fine. But if you said you're just doing screen for the rest of your life, I'd worry. And it's tough to split your time. Like it depends on where. At the moment, like I'm based between Egypt and the US, and so it's tough to kind of find a contract that allows you to do that, and schedules are very difficult. Like the one person that I'm always like I want to be is Kate Blanchett, because for years she was just doing like a screen job a year or one every 2 years, and most of the time she was just running a theater back in Australia. But yeah, it's different. Like I love, like both are great, and both I love both mainly because they're working with people. Like that's what's fun for me. But there's just something that isn't the same with theater, like because it's so immediate, and it's not like you film a thing and then that's the performance and someone edits it in a room, and it's kind of like organic with an audience every night. So I miss that.
Egypt has a really rich tradition of film and cinema and TV, dating back and at any point in the history of film and cinema and TV in the Arab world, Egypt is at the front line. But is that true for theater too? Were you a kid who was aware of new theater coming out of Egypt?
By the time I was born, it wasn't the way it used to be. But I think, and this is true for I think a lot of people across the Arab world, but especially in Egypt, like we grew up watching plays that were filmed in the 60s and 70s and 80s and some older, which were as kind of ubiquitous, like for Ramadan or Eid as, you know, Musalsal or an old film, like you'd watch old plays.
Yeah, of course.
So there was a very rich theatrical tradition, and I think what happened in the 80s and 90s is that it became more and more commercialized, and it lost some state support, and there was also a bit more state censorship. And now it's you know, there are a lot of small companies doing great work, but there just isn't the support that there used to be for it, unfortunately.
Oh, I think this is something that you've touched on already, but maybe to sink into it a little bit more. I think there's a lot of actors that are known for their work in the West, you know, whether they're of Arab origin or from another part of the world. And then there's some actors that are known for their work in sort of quote unquote their homeland per se. And I think there's also a very few set of artists that kind of balance this in between and both at the same time. And it sounds like that's very important to you, to sort of both be based and feel like you're in Egypt, and also to have that foot elsewhere. So how do you manage that as an artist, as an actor?
So when I first started basing myself more in Cairo after I studied, which was like 3 years ago, people were like, no, choose one. You can't do both. It's impossible, and you'll burn out. And I was very stubborn. And I do think it's somewhere in the middle. Like it can be tough. Because even if I was just like, oh, I'll just work in the States, there's still that kind of weird place you live in where you can get a phone call that's like, you're moving to Montreal for 6 months. And it's like, yeah, I am. But being in Cairo, and then also like and being in New York and being in LA, and also trying to get back to London to do some theater work is like, it's hard. But what I don't think, and of course there's stuff like visas and whatever, which makes it 17 times more complicated.
Yeah.
I think though, in terms of like the lines between the industries aren't as hardly drawn as they once might have been. And that's partly because of self-tape auditions, which are now global. And even if you're in LA, most of the time you'll get a self-tape audition first round anyway. And it's also because of, you know, people have access now. Like we're on Netflix watching, you know, Spanish TV shows, and we don't think twice about it. So I think there's more of it doesn't feel so much like that's just the US industry and it's impenetrable to anyone from the outside, or European industry, or, you know, it's a bit more fluid.
Do you think about being typecasted a certain way when you're living in between those worlds? And not only obviously the US is the obvious, we're being typecasted as Arabs, but even in Egypt, I would also assume that there's also a typecast that you can fit into. How do you prevent that as an actor? How do you have to be selective and think through which projects you do and which projects you don't?
I mean, you just said it, you have to be selective, but also I think you have to have people that you trust for advice. And you also have to know that you don't have to listen to everyone's advice, because there will be very well-meaning people in your life who will say you can't turn something down because of who you're working with, because of the network that it's on, because of blah, 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 even though like everything inside you is going like, this is not what I want my career to be, or this is not a piece of work that I'm ever going to want to see myself in, or it's wrong, or blah, blah, blah. And it does happen in both industries in different ways. Like in Egypt, I've turned certain things down because I didn't want to be furthering a certain image of like women, for instance, or I've turned something down because it should have gone to someone who was Afro-Arab or a Black Arab, and the fact that it was going to an actress who was, lighter skinned, to me was like, that's what we're trying, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would she look like that? And in the States, even though it's getting a lot better, like, yeah, you have to, I'm very, very careful if I get a script that asks for an Arab American, or I read very, very carefully. And a lot of the time my agent is kind of convincing me to go. She's like, I do the first round and we'll get more information, whereas I like from the off, I'm like, who wrote this? What is the agenda? And she's like, calm down. Like, it's just a scene. So I think it's easier than it would have been, than it was 6 years ago. Like, the conversations I'm having now are very different than they were, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So you do have to kind of be careful. In terms of like, because I studied acting in the US and the UK, I got to kind of be told pretty much like, this is our philosophy, in both countries. And with the US, because the US is coming from a place of method acting in a way, which I think has been completely removed from what it actually was, and is like now just, I think people use that word in the wrong way and like make a lot of messes. But there's more of a focus on kind of feeling than there is on text a lot of the time. And that's like theater based. And then in the UK, it's more like, no, like the text is the most important thing, and like Shakespeare. And you kind of, it's not even just about country anymore. It's just different people work in different ways, and you just have to kind of adjust to that. But I did, like in the UK, my training was so classical, which for me is like good because I'm so head led and I'm such a nerd. So it was nice for someone to be like, there's paper. It's okay. If you get stuck, just look and you'll find answers in it, And in the US, it was like, no, throw all that out the window and like lie down on the floor and feel things and cry. So that's very different. And honestly, in Egypt, I've learned, I think also because I worked on lots of different film sets in Egypt, and film sets in Egypt are so vast, so much bigger than most things in the US. And like that, and that's like blockbusters. Like in Egypt, the smallest set is masses of people. So I've actually learned just a lot about being like, being able to do my job with like 200 people watching me, that's a lot. It's like, well, now cry. And your husband is leaving and you're a ghost. And once he leaves, you disappear. Like, what? And there's 150 men going like, hi. So it's,
We're getting a lot of questions about Ramy, and I know that a lot of people want to hear about it. One thing before I want to ask you about a specific scene, but before we ask, I also just want to say there's a lot of people I think haven't watched Ramy, and there's a lot of people who certainly haven't watched season 2. So I'm going to try to, well, it hasn't come out in the UK, if I understand. So I'm going to try to not give away any spoilers. Okay, I'm going to try really hard.
I'll be very general.
Okay. So then maybe to give a little bit of intro into what Mikey's about to play. You are entering a mosque with the main character Ramy. You being Amani, your character.
So we're actually not entering a mosque. We're entering a real place in Cairo called Makan, which hosts a lot of different like arts things and whatever. One of the things that it hosts is they do hadras and zikrs in there. So we're going to hadra basically.
There's somewhere I want to take you. It's really close. You'll get it when we get there. Just don't freak out.
Okay. Yeah, let's go.
وروى مسلم في صحيحه بسنده من حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال والذي نفسي بيده لا تدخلوا الجنة حتى تؤمنوا ولا تؤمنوا حتى تحابوا أولا أدلكم على شيء إذا فعلتموه تحاببتم أفشوا السلام بينكم صدق رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم.
قال صلى الله عليه وسلم أفضل ما قلته أنا والنبيون من قبلي قول.
I think it continues, and there's a beautiful dhikr that happens, and you and Amani, I should say, and Ramy share a really special moment. Like it's just a very emotional moment, and even for the audience watching it, I remember just being taken away. I'm interested, Rosalie, if you could tell us a little bit about the process here. So, you know, what was it like to prepare, I guess, for such a symbolic and moving scene? How many takes does a scene like that take? And also, you're working with so many people, I think, in this case, who aren't actors. So what's that experience like?
So it was really, that was actually a really special scene. It was fun. It was funny watching it because I haven't seen it since season 1 came out. So the experience of working on Ramy in general, both season 1 and 2, is amazing because it's such a close-knit family. And like Ramy is very, he likes to involve you in all of the decisions and to make sure that you know like why this scene exists here. And there's a lot of conversation back and forth. And especially for us on season 1, because it was only like a skeletal part of the crew that came out from New York, and it was just me and Ramy in Cairo. Like none of the other main cast members were there with us, and it was just like a couple of the writers, and it was like a little bit of the American crew and some Egyptian crew. It was super intimate. And we were basically going over this was one of the scenes that like was in the first like draft of the script. We were figuring out like where it happened and then what it looked like and all that kind of thing. Like up until we shot it, basically, like we went with Makan, I think 12 hours or something before we were meant to shoot. We were like, we have Makan. We were like on the go, but like all the locations were like that because we really wanted to shoot in the real places. So like when we were having a drink in like Fishewi, we wanted it to be Fishewi. When we were walking in Moaz, we wanted it to be Moaz. Like we didn't want to cheat any location. And basically prepping for that was easy in the sense that it was a real hadra, you know, like those men. That's an actual Sufi group that is at Makan every 2 weeks. So what was said to them was just, we don't want you to cheat anything, you know, for the most part. Like we want this to be as real of an experience as it can be. And a lot of the people who were there were people who had attended the hadras before, were friends of crew, friends of cast. So it wasn't a difficult scene in the sense that it was actually the only work I had to do was just to kind of like let go and not think about it too much. Was just be like, Amani actually experiencing this. And we didn't have to really cheat the eye lines. Like Ramy was actually sitting right there. So it wasn't, I thought it was the kind of thing where you're like, oh, we're gonna have to do like 25 takes of this because it's like super important. And I think we did one wide shot to get everything in, and then like one close up of me and one of him, and that was it.
And so two-part question. How has the series been received in Egypt, particularly among your colleagues and among industry folks and your circles? That's the first question. The second question is, do you feel like the reception in the States, that people get the message that you were trying to portray? Or do you feel like you're speaking to people, you're still not exactly?
I think it's a really good exercise, and once you make the thing, you kind of have to let it go, you know? Like, people are going to see it from different perspectives depending on who they are. I think when we were making it, You know, it wasn't like we were making like the Arab American show, and we didn't want it to be that. Like, it wasn't like the Muslim show. It's not a show that's supposed to represent the كل مسلم في العالم at all. It's not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be a very specific show about specific people. And the nice thing about it is that a lot of the reception that we got, a lot of the messages that I started getting back from when season 1 started airing wasn't just from Arab Americans or Muslims or Arabs. It was just from first generation anything or second generation anything, you know, being like, hi, I'm Vietnamese and Catholic and this is my family, which was very much what we were hoping for, was the kind of the specificity of it also lending itself to parallel, you know, because the more truthful a story is, I think the more universal it becomes. I think, of course, there's this pressure on it, right, from so many different directions. One is from maybe an audience that is, you know, or even like news anchors or late night, you know, chat show hosts who are white, who are kind of going, you know, like, this is a show about Muslim people and how do you write Muslim people? And it's kind of being like, it's a show about people, you know, like, no one's saying that Succession is the show about Irish Americans, but it's just because it's seen as a first. There's so much pressure on it, and I think if you take that pressure into yourself, you buckle, because there's no way that we can represent all experiences, especially in the tiny amount of time that we have, that 10 short episodes. And then here, I think, you know, there's both here and in the States, there's, especially with season 2, it was fun because I think there were some people that I felt the way that I felt about what happened in season 2 and kind of were like, got that. And then some people who were very angry about certain things because they were like, this is not, you're portraying a version of Islam that, you know, is sinful, which was always kind of going to be the case. And in my immediate circles, I mean, for me personally, Amani is someone that I didn't realize was missing for me. Like, when I read the script, I didn't realize, oh, I've never seen this person and she's close to me. And I didn't even realize that I was missing that kind of representation, because I didn't even think of it being that possible, you know? And I think in the sort of circles that I'm in, there's been kind of like a similar reception, which is like, the only spaces you had before were kind of, I guess, mostly American shows where you were used to seeing people that are not like you, or maybe Egyptian or Middle Eastern produced shows where you can't talk about these things. So there's like a weird, you know, it felt like it was a merging of both industries for me anyway.
Rose, there's a question here about, do you see an evolution in the types of role women can play in Arab media? And what more do you wish to see? And specifically to you, what roles would you like to play?
I mean, actually, if we're looking at the history of female roles in the Middle East, we actually have a history of women producing films, being the stars of films, their own merits, for a very long time, you know? And in that sense, like, you would think we have a very strong history to kind of pull from. I think what I would like to see, I mean, at the moment in the Middle East, it's difficult because most of the time people in TV shows and in movies don't talk the way we talk, you know? There's sort of an elevated language that we have to use. We can't swear. We can't tackle certain topics. So there's always going to be a certain, like, anyone that you play is going to have that's just a little bit of a cheat, you know, like a married couple doesn't touch each other, like that kind of thing. You're always kind of like cheating with it a little bit. I think I would like to see more diversity in terms of what female actors look like, to be honest. I don't think it's a secret that our industry is dominated by lighter skinned female actors and actors in general, particularly with women. And I would like to see there tends to be this, even if we're playing, you know, a family that's supposed to be middle class, they live in very nice surroundings. You know, there's a very, it's always like a very polished version of Cairo. And I would just, I guess I would like to see, I'd like to see the Cairo that I see when I step outside a little bit more. And I'd like to see more women written by women, basically.
I'm interested in like you as a full person and exploring some of the questions that are some of the things that people don't necessarily know. You are a visual artist, and you have these beautiful paintings. How do you form the rest of the work that you're doing? Is it just like a separate outlet? Do you find that this is part of the same part of your brain where the sort of acting and theater?
Visual artist is a very generous way of describing what I do. Thank you. It's just I I think it all informs everything. You know, I think what I've discovered the most about myself is that if I'm not making something, I go a bit crazy. I most enjoy myself when I'm making something with other people. But then sometimes I just want to, you know, kind of shut myself in a room, or I'm forced to shut myself in a room because of quarantine. And then the self-expression that I have is like, you know, waving a paintbrush or something. But I think, I don't know, I think everything, I think archaeology and classics and what I studied at the LSE, like post-colonial theory and everything, I think and the acting all informs itself. Like you're basically just kind of studying people and trying to understand why we are the way we are, and why our stories, why we tell the stories that we do about ourselves. So it's all kind of in the same weird mix of things. Like my dad keeps having me pick one thing and be really good at it, and I'm like, nah, I'm just gonna do loads of things and just be mediocre. It's gonna be great.
I wanted to ask you, you've hinted to this a little bit. Obviously, this is such a difficult, interesting, maybe even like potentially a very creative time for a lot of artists. But at the same time, cinemas are closed, theaters are closed. From your perspective, both, I kind of want to focus on the theater and the cinema. What are some opportunities? I mean, you can go on Vimeo now and you can see some shows that I would have never been able to see. But what is the world going to look like, you know, in 6 months, in a year? What do you foresee sort of come up? It's a bit of a predictive question, but I know it's a tough one.
Yeah, no. It's not. It's the conversations that we're having in meetings all the time. You know, it's like, what's happening? I think anyone who tells you they know the answer to that is lying. But I can tell you what the current fears are. Yeah. I think what we're seeing, and we're seeing it more actually happen, especially in the UK, like today, and kind of in the US as well, but the US system is different, is I think the last places to come back and the places that will suffer most are the ones where there's live performance, so theatre. Yeah. Also the smaller independent spaces. And that's really, really tough because for one thing, that's where a lot of people train, and not just actors, you know, like in terms of playwrights, directors, a lot of them come from theatre, and it's those tiny theatres on top of pubs and like under other theatres where people kind of get to get better, you know, and you're going to see the stuff that isn't massively commercial and needs to sell $200 tickets to be mounted, you know. And what's scary is the idea is that in 6 months or a year's time, what comes back is just the big blockbuster stuff, and we lose all the independent stuff. The good thing, I guess, is that we do have now things like, you know, people, I was on the jury of like this film competition where people were supposed to film like short films on their phones in quarantine. And there were some great things that came out of that, you know? So like, it's not that it's impossible. And I think people will be pushed into creating their own work, and that's great. But I think the idea of that coming of kind of like institutions kind of going like, oh, they'll be fine, or states going, oh, they'll be fine, and not supporting the industry is actually really heartbreaking. In terms of like what artists can do right now, like for one thing, no pressure. Because I know there's this whole thing, there are some people that are like, this is the time to like write your script, or like this is the time to like make a short film by yourself. It's like, actually you can be depressed and eat loads of carbs, it's okay, you know, like it's a pandemic, we're allowed to feel that way. But it is, you know, it's that, if it's write things down if you can, or paint, or take stupid little things on your phone, or take voice notes of things, you know, because it's a lot, it's for some people who are alone. And especially if you're used to working with other people, like I guess it's the one time that you're going to be forced to create an output that's just you. Mm-hmm. Whether that's good or not, I am discovering. Great. But yeah,
we're going to do a quick Q&A. This is going to be rapid fire, so that we can get to other questions. The first question is, what are you reading right now?
Okay, so I prepared myself for your question, and it's these two books, which are Cairo's Ultras, and Crowds and Sultans, which is about urban protest in late medieval Egypt and Syria. And they're both from AUC Press, and this isn't even a plug. It's just like they sent me things and I love them. So these are what I tend to read more than one thing at the same time because I have no attention span. That's that.
Okay, perfect. Who would you love to shadow for a day, past or present?
I should have thought about these, shouldn't I? I would love, okay. I would love to shadow Nefertiti, and this is not even a joke, just because I'm fascinated by that whole time, and I just want to know what the hell actually happened. That's all.
What do people most enjoy your work or your profession?
Ooh, I'm trying to understand about my profession. I'll just tell you the question I get the most, which I feel misunderstands my profession, which is people being like, when you kiss someone on screen, are you really kissing? She's like, yes, but no. No, it's weird and it's awkward, and like people are watching and you have to do it 27 times to get the angle right, and like you never want to kiss anyone again after you do. It's not fun. It's not sexy. That kiss on the bridge, sorry to ruin it for any Ramy season 1 people.
Oh, you like you're doing.
I'm sorry. No, it's season 1. It's fine. I can say season 1 things, but I'm just saying that scene took a very long time, and we were kissing on command a lot. So, but it was very romantic in the end. Yep. Sorry.
So whose work do you have inspired by?
I've already mentioned Kate Blanchett, which used to be my go-to answer, and still is in a way because of the way that she manages to split her time between like theater and screen. But I think at the moment I'm just kind of I'm most inspired by people that I see breaking boundaries just kind of by being who they are and writing honestly. Like I'm a massive fan of Michaela Cole right now. If anyone is not watching her new show that just came out on HBO called I Will Destroy You, like she's amazing. But yeah, anyone I see as well, like especially right now, the moment that we're in, I'm very inspired by anyone in this industry who is risking their work to speak out about things in the industry that are not right.
Thank you for presenting today, by the way. It was very interesting. Okay, I have to keep it quick and discreet. So my question is, there's been classical problems with Orientalist depictions of Arabs within sort of like Western media and theater and TV and movies. Now that sort of that sphere is changing with like online subscription services like Hulu, which Ramy is on, how do you feel that sort of an Orientalist issue is changing with that as well?
It's a really good question. Thank you. I think it is changing. Honestly, I think there's a big question. There's a big conversation about diversity that's happening across the board right now. I think the actual change doesn't just happen when you put different people in front of the camera. It changes when you put different people behind the camera. So I think the reason that something like Ramy happened and looked the way it did is because people at Hulu went, you know what? We're not going to tell you who you need to direct this or showrun it or write it. You bring in the people that you think can tell the story honestly. And I think what we're seeing in the industry is not just due to streaming and what we can see. It's also the people behind the scenes are changing. Hiring practices are changing. Hopefully they're about to change even more. But it doesn't mean that Orientalism doesn't still exist. It doesn't mean that you still don't have to look out for it. It doesn't mean that sometimes you can kind of be led onto a project and then kind of halfway through the prep process be like, this doesn't feel right anymore, you know? And also I think we practice sometimes a form of self-orientalization without even realizing it because of what we're so used to seeing. So we're also changing what we think is okay to do as well, because what you may have grown up watching actually might not be great. But yeah.
Thanks, Ramy. So we have Marwan up next, and after Marwan, we have Rula.
Hi, Rosie. Actually,
Hi.
I want to ask you about this box which behind you. Is it all of that you read it? Which behind you?
Yeah,
because,
this is my childhood bedroom.
I saw a book. It's talking about the tasawwuf for Dr. Farid Din Lattar. He is it's, the bird's logic. I know this is from the famous books talking about tasawwuf. So you are very good reader for your scene. I mean, for doing such hadra, you are reading book for Din Lattar. This is so good from you. Actually, I wanted to ask about this. It seemed that you are very good reader and academic girl.
I'm a big nerd. Yeah, I read. And I like studying for a character, but actually I own these books already because just because I had them because I was researching a script, I think in 2016, and then the script had fallen away, but I just kept reading because I was interested. So I had a lot of material to kind of fall back into when we were preparing for Ramy. Yeah, but yeah, also because I panic whenever I'm about to act in anything or prepare for anything, I always feel like I can't do it, and the thing that calms me down is studying. So yeah, I know. I mean, the like the scenes actually of me showing Ramy around Wise came very organically because I do that to people when they come visit.
I like what you did in your hijab. Like you show a little bit from your hair. That's me. You saw this before. I mean, I feel like I saw this before in Hadra in Tasawwuf because I saw that in the south of Egypt, and I saw it also in Hussein and Sayyida Aisha and these places. So it's perfect, really, what you did.
Thank you. I'm really.
Thanks, Marwan.
Yeah, thank you. It just, like it was it was a nice set to just be naturally sucked into.
Great, thanks, Marwan. We have Rula left, and then Farida after that, and then I think we're going to take more after that.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Rose, I love what you said, that it's a show about people, because as I watch it, it doesn't represent me, but it's a fantastic show. And, I make a point to recommend it to all my friends who are not Arab, not American, not Muslim, none of these things. We all have different experiences just as people. And I think it's great. And I loved how you shared the authentic moment of how you started, like your debut with the dress and all of that. So my question to you is, how long did it take you from the debut to becoming who you are today? Because I'm much older than you. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm in my 40s. So I'm just wondering if you could say it's never too late to start, blah, blah. But the question is really, how long does it take from the minute you start to where you are today? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, by the way. What you said means a lot to me. Like the fact that it means a lot when someone says, you know what, I'm not in this show, but I still appreciate what it is and believe these people is huge. So thank you, because that's what we were trying to do. Look, there are going to be people in your life that are going to tell you all the time that you should have started 10 years ago. Okay. Like I'm 29 and there are people who will be like, you should have been where you are when you were 19. Like there's always going to be that, especially when it comes to women. I genuinely don't think that there is a time which is too late, because honestly, I felt like I went to drama school and I started drama school after I'd already done my first degree and a master's, and there were people starting drama school just out of high school, but we were just in different places, like I was coming to it with so much more, and the parts that I was ready to play were different. And I do think that as the industry is changing and women's roles are changing, actually I think there's a huge there's a boon to someone who comes in with a bit more experience. And your 40s is not, that's not, I don't know what people have been telling you, but that's not old at all. And I think even now, if you go on Netflix and you look at like these shows that are being led by female leads, so many of these women are in their 40s, mid 40s, late 40s. And it's just not, you know, I think it's great if you're looking to get into it now. It's, so that debut with my dress was when I was 18. But I spent 3 years in drama school, and I graduated drama school in 2016. So I guess from graduating, I was doing like some professional theater work before then, but I guess from graduating drama school to now, it's been almost 4 years.
Great. Thank you so much, Roda. Farida, you're up next.
Hi. First of all, I want to say I love you. I love you in the show, and I love you on Instagram. And anyway, I was just wondering, did you face any troubles when you were getting into the Egyptian film industry?
Troubles? Sure. I mean, like, I think it was a different structure. You know what I mean? Like, I also came from the UK where there was an agent, and an audition would come in, and you would take the audition or you would go to the audition, and there was just a system that worked. And then in Egypt, it was like square one. I don't know what I'm doing at all, and who I'm supposed to be talking to, and where I find auditions, and where do I go. I was also very stupid in that I thought that spending 9 years outside the country would have had no effect on my Arabic. So I came back like bilingual, bitches. And then I started doing auditions in Arabic, and I was like, why is my tongue so big? Like, what happened? And I realized that I was out of practice. So it took me a year of basically just making sure that I was hanging out with my friends who only spoke Arabic, and like not going into my like school tiny circles of like speaking English, to get myself to a place where I felt comfortable. And then of course there's a question of perception, you know, like I think for some people I was just this girl who'd come from abroad and was going to do a very specific thing. I think, and this isn't not just in Egypt, but anywhere in the world, when you're getting into the film industry, there are going to be people who look at you a certain way because you're a young woman. And in the UK, I was kind of protected by bubbles. I was protected by my agent. I was protected by my drama school. I was protected by, and then I came here, and it was just like, you're kind of at it on your own, you know? So there's a lot of standing your ground and not, and kind of risking being rude. Also, the last thing I'm going to say is, I think in Egypt, one of the things I was taught in drama school, and my agent in the UK and the US would both say, was like, oh, say no. You know, say no. If something's not right, you should always feel comfortable saying no. And in Egypt, I got here and I was like, you can't say no to a part. Are you insane? Like, what do you mean? So there was also that, and that I did say no from the beginning, and I have been saying no. And I think it's, especially in an industry where there are not very many female parts, but lots of young women looking for parts, you kind of have to hold your ground a lot.
I want to ask you, because I think a lot of people are also wondering, season 3, is it happening, and are you in it? Okay. Fingers crossed. Like we have plans for season 3 if we get greenlit, but we don't know. And genuinely, we don't know. I mean, the thing about Ramy is that it's a show that's built on little moments, you know, and when those moments come, it kind of depends on how the story goes. Like season 2, when it was first sort of, the order of it was completely different, and some things happened in season 2 that was supposed to happen in season 3, and we have this ambitious plan for like 2 more seasons, you know, so we have no idea, but we hope we get season 3.
Rose, thank you so much for joining Afikra Conversations. It was a pleasure to have you. Tariq, thanks so much for this, for helping. And to all of you who joined, please take a second to tell a friend, bring more people into the conversation. This has been a fantastic event. Rose, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Last words.
Thank you, and thank you everyone who joined and who had questions. And yeah, this is great.